Okay, look, I have shot this intro, numerous times, and I've decided this car deserves better in terms of documentation, video documentation, than I'm going to be able to give it. But here it is. This is my 70 Mustang Mach 1. I bought it when I was 15. I drove it for a bunch of years, and then it sat. I abandoned it, and the car ended up sitting, and that's from the mid-90s till today. It's been off the road in one form or another. Now, about 20 years ago, it got some work. It got floorboards, it got quarter panels, it got, we started a restoration. I was away at grad school. My father put a bunch of work in the car. We had the quarter panels and stuff. We probably could have done it ourselves, but in terms of time, effort, and energy, that's not good. What did I just crush? As I was saying, that we probably had the resources and we could have done the work ourselves, but at some point we thought it was better to hire a guy to do the work. So it got, floor pan on both sides, inner and outer wheel houses, full quarter panels, front torque boxes were repaired, rust in the doors was done, the bottom of the doors where they always rust. And that's true on both sides of the car in terms of quarter panels, torque boxes, inner and outer wheel housings, floorboards. Basically anything that needed to be done at the time was done, and then the car went off to paint. It's the original bright gold metallic. I don't know what it looks like on camera. Sometimes it looks orange, depending on saturation. And really what it is, the color is basically a desaturated orange. It has not... The car was painted in like 2003, so it's been 21 years since it was painted, and it's never been washed. It was a base coat, clear coat paint, and the car started to go back together. That's why it's got some of the interior done. It's got a back seat that's been reupholstered. Sorry, I can't. Well, I don't know. Anyway, you can see that. Headliner's been redone. The door panels are the door panels that came on the car when I got it, which are the original door panels that have been covered in vinyl. In a black, well, they were covered in a blue vinyl, and then at some point during my ownership, and I bought, again, I got this car when I was 15. That was 1988. The car was blue with white trim, so the rockers were white. It had a rear spoiler. I still have it, but it was white. Hood scoop was white. It had a blue interior with blue shag carpet and a blue, believe it or not, a stitched leather dash pad, and a white fuzzy console, and it had white fur in the package tray and all this other stuff. And oh yeah, it had chrome wagon wheels and chrome thrush side pipes, which I do still have. The car was definitely a 70s street freak holdover. But the problem was, we started doing all of this work, and then it would sit. Sometimes in a garage, a lot of times just outside. But about 10 years ago, I disassembled the car and pulled the engine. It was a placeholder 302. Let's take a look at that. All right, had to get the garage door open. Back when we got the car, the shock towers, one of the shock towers failed and cracked and broke. It was after I was testing the brakes, after rebuilding the brakes. I was 15, doing what you do to learn about how to do that. And we put a 302 in it. We took out the original 351. It's a 351 two-barrel car with an FMX transmission, factory. And we took apart the original 351 Windsor and found all the pistons cracked. So in went a 302 from a 71 Torino, which eventually got replaced with a parts store long block. Like Advance Auto Parts back in the day, you could buy one of these, this particular one, for $550 with a core exchange. That's what was in the car until 10 years ago. 2013, car wasn't running right. Could not get it to run. I was trying to get it on the road. Could not get it to run right. Went through all the process and found an extra 2 quarts in the pan, which was gasoline. Car had been running very rich, stuck float or whatever. It seems like the cam's probably wide because there's next to no valve lift on some cylinders, which explains why some of the cylinders had very low compression. That is a problem because that engine's no good. Good news. Good news. Right over here, right over there, is a crate 408 Windsor. Now it's a iron head. I got the low end version of it because that's what I could afford 10 years ago. But it's all brand new parts from a we'll call it a name builder or rebuilder. And you can see I outfitted it with all the things. The yellowing clear on aluminum parts is not great, but whatever. Again, 10 years ago I started putting this together. So then what happened? So I was working on the car a lot. You know, I was coming every weekend. Weather got hot, and then I got heat sickness 2 weeks in a row. I mean, absolute misery. I absolutely hated it. It was, you know, I was sick, vomiting for 2 or 3 days, and that happened 2 weeks in a row. And then, you know, my kids were 6 and 9. And if you have kids that age, you got family stuff going on. It's just very, very time consuming. And somehow this just got lost in the mix. Well, now my kids are 16 and 19. They're both going to college. They're basically completely independent. So I'm back. I'm back trying to get this thing back on the road. And that's the goal. That's where I'm at. Now, you know, a couple of weeks ago, literally 2 weeks ago, I said, I'm going to get this thing on the road by January 1st. Well, that was, again, 2 weeks ago. And it's now the 15th of December. I don't think it's going to happen. And in the process, and I don't know what sequence of this video where this is going to end up, I have found some things. I have found some things that are going to take some time and effort to fix. And it doesn't help that just like right now when I open that passenger door, the antenna was in place. And when I opened the door, I chipped paint off the car. So that sort of thing's going to have to get, you know, I'm going to have to sand and touch that up. The other day, we can talk about the good and the bad, but the other day, I found there are just spots where rust scale has cropped up. One of the things we did 10 years ago is I made my own shock tower reinforcements. These are not the original shock towers. As I mentioned, the shock towers were damaged when I got the car. I didn't know anything about these cars. They'd been drilled to access the upper control arm shafts to lube them. That's the only way you could get to them. So it was really common practice back in the day that they would get drilled or cut big enough, big hole, to get a grease gun in there to lubricate that. What that led to is the shock towers cracked around those. And because it was a small block car, it had no reinforcements around the corners, no reinforcements at the base. And so when they failed, that necessitated being replaced. What we did was we got a pair of used, back in the day you couldn't get new shock towers, that came out of a 70 coupe from a junkyard. It was $80 for the pair, torched out. We found a frame shop that would put them in for like $500 or $600. So there you go. Got replacement shock towers, so not the original shock towers. They've been through some stuff since then, though. I got to tell you, there was a particularly bad incident where I had to pop the car over a curb at like 30, 40 miles an hour to avoid an accident because someone cut me off. But they handled that. The whole chassis is still solid. When they put them in, they seam welded instead of just spot welding it back the way it was. It all got seam welded in. They reinforced it at the top, at the bottom, at the frame, etc., etc. So 10 years ago, we made these. I made these reinforcement brackets. Had my brother help me weld them in. He was better at it. And in the places where we stripped it to do that, rust crept in. So it's at all the places around where we, you know, so that we could get weld in there. So I'm going to go through today and descale, derust all this, and get it recoated and repainted. And then we can, then I can move on to the things. My initial goal is to get the car running and driving. What's that mean? A working engine, a working transmission. This is not the original transmission. This is an AOD. 10, 20 years ago when I chose to do this, an AOD was a viable and reasonable thing. Today, maybe you wouldn't do it, but I'm committed. I've got parts to make it a little stronger, and so we'll put those in. The brakes got all rebuilt. Master cylinder is clearly stuck. I replaced the booster because the old booster was leaking, and now the brake pedal is just hard as rock. So, while maybe every corner, and it does roll, I will have dug it out of its spot where it has rested for 10 years and pushed it over here. So, brakes are not seized or anything. It's got factory front disc, rear drums on the 9-inch in the back. But it's probably going to need a master cylinder, or at least, I mean, I'll see if I can get that one working. I doubt it. The last thing is, so engine, transmission, brakes, steering. You're looking at one of the most terrible versions of power steering there is. So this is the hydraulically assisted ram that helps with the steering. It's usually over assisted. There's too much. It's like one finger. It's terrible. And then it's overly complicated, and there's lots of leak points, and they never seal right. They leak even if you reseal them or get rebuilt. Once they leak in a year, it's terrible. I think they probably leaked from the factory. I got a solution for that, which is I've got a Borgeson box, integrated power steering, so it'll be a box with hoses that needs to go in. So that's the plan. Get the car running and driving, do those things. Get the car back on the road so I can finish reassembling and then dealing with some of the other issues the car has. There's lots of good in this car. And then there's some bad stuff. The rust has crept in places where seam sealer was, and you can see there's a small hole there. These have rusted. They were rusted years ago. They're rusted now. Even though we treated them and all that stuff, rust just has crept in. One of the worst things you can do for a car, listen to me, worse than riding it hard and putting it away wet, worse than taking it off-roading or whatever, worse than maybe crashing it because you'd get it fixed, is letting a car sit. Worse than all of that is letting a car sit. And that is the crime I have committed. So I'm back here, going to get the car back on the road. I know this has been a bunch of rambling. I hope you listened to it on fast forward. Maybe I'll put it in fast forward. I'm speaking as quickly as possible to make it as short as possible, but here we are. Anyway, I'm going to get started spying the rust, the drill out, steel brush, etc., etc.